And as we do on every Tuesday here during the season, we welcome in ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky. And Dan's segment brought to you by Ellicott Hotels. Fans, round up your family, friends, or coworkers for a fantastic game day experience at 500 Pearl. Reserve your pack. Book your group event today at 500pearlbuffalo.com. Dan, how we doing? We know you've been a champion of the play-action pass. The Bills are doing it with great degree of success. I'm going to bust off some numbers on you. This is off play-action this season. Josh Allen, 27 of 33, 451 yards, 5 tutties, no picks, and a perfect passer rating of 158.3. I guess that's hard to argue with.
I'm going to jump on top of that. QBR of 98. Now, a perfect QBR is 100. This is the one that blows my mind the most. Guess how many yards per attempt he's averaging in play action? Attempt, not completion.
Oh, it's a fat number. I think it's like 14 or something, isn't it?
17.
Woo!
17 yards per attempt. So here's the reason why I absolutely love. I thought this past weekend was the best game that Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey have had together. Okay, I'm very critical of coaches every so often because I always try to take the player's perspective. I also think that there's opportunities, deservedly and rightfully so, to praise when guys are really good. Ken Dorsey, what he has leaned into this year has to be praised. It has to be, because this is the reason why the play action matters so much for Buffalo. It allows their two best players to play at their strength, their highest level of strength. What I mean by that is this. When they play action, it just takes a little bit longer time-wise. Steph's superpower as a wide receiver is his route running, but you want to give him the time to get down the field in that route running. Well, therefore, the play action matters because you have more time in play action. So it allows his strength to be always at the forefront. With Josh Allen, what's Josh's strength? The arm, the ability to drive the football down the field and make really challenging throws downfield. So what do you need to do that on a consistent basis? Time. So it's allowing the route running skills of Steph to be a bigger part of the conversation, and then the arm strength for Josh to be at the bigger part of the conversation. And then it takes the weakest part of their offense, which is the pass protection of their offensive line, and it never really exposes them. Because when you're in play action, one, they're often doing it with, some type of tight end or two tight ends attached to those tackles, right on the hips of the tackles. So now those guys have some help. There's at least a body near them. Sometimes those guys chip, sometimes they're out, but there's a body near them. Second of all, when you're under center doing it specifically, those defensive linemen have to play with hesitancy and doubt. It's not, I know the ball's shotgun, quarterback's going to be there and is more than likely to throw. Is it a handoff? Is it a not? After the fake, is the quarterback going to be behind the center, or is it a little bit of a half roll to the guard or the tackle? Like, the quarterback's a moving target then for defensive linemen. It makes them play a little bit slower and hesitant. And then to put on top of that, when they're from under center and they're running the football, they're the second best run team in the NFL. So just for Bills fans to conceptualize this, Josh Allen from under center as the second best run game in football. Good night. Good night.
Yeah, that's the thing. And so we've been asking our listeners. They played at such a high level this last week against Miami, and they've scored 37, 38, 48 in 3 consecutive weeks. But it's week 4. And so if you take the health out of it, certainly if somebody gets injured or whatever, you can take that out. But other than that, if everybody stays healthy, how do they keep this sharp for 3 months until the playoffs start? You know what I'm saying? It's hard. Sure. It's a grind, man. And teams, and they don't play in a vacuum. Great defensive coordinators, great players they're going to face. How do you've been in the league, you've played. It's really difficult to stay razor sharp week after week after week after week, even when you're playing well and winning. And maybe because you're playing well and you're winning, it's hard to stay sharp. What are your thoughts on the grind that the season's going to turn into and how they can play like this going forward?
Yeah, Steve, I think number one, and you know this, understanding that it's probably not going to be the case every single week. That's just the reality. It more than likely won't. And you're going to have a week or two that you don't kind of execute and excel at that way. I think that the most important part of that is the discipline between Ken Dorsey and Josh at the same time. Health, obviously, but the discipline for Ken to call it, the discipline for Ken to call a little bit of the run from under there, the discipline for Josh. So often when you're calling these play action plays, okay, I'll live in that for just a fragment of a second. When you're calling these plays, so often you're calling it with the thought of getting a shot or a chunk. And one of the things that happens with quarterbacks sometimes, and probably more when you're younger, but Josh isn't young anymore, is you know why the guy's calling the play, and you're like, here we go, here's my shot, here's my chance, like let's go make a throw, let's get a chunk. And there's going to be games that defenses just do an incredible job of staying on top of everything, and the second level of the defense just they have such a great job of turning and running underneath stuff. The discipline of taking some of I think he threw a check down at one point over the middle of the field to James Cook for 8 or 9 yards on it. So just the consistency and the discipline of doing it. I think the second thing is, in that play action world, when they get into their 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, and the receivers are on the, more than likely teams are going to try to start favoring Steph in that world. So can Gabe hurt defenses in that play action world the way that Steph is? And I think, like, knowing sometimes, like, teams are going to start to pressure your play action protection. Like, here's what happens, when it comes to that offensive line wise, because you got to move laterally more often than not with some of these play actions. You can't lose early, and you can't lose inside. Teams are going to start to stunt defensive linemen. What I mean by that is, like, slant them inside in those looks to try and force Josh to move. So that'll be important for their offensive line. But I think just the discipline of trying to take it week by week, calling the runs when they have to, Josh making the right decision, even if it's 4 or 5 times in a row in those play action concepts, because it's not there, doing that. I also loved, not only just the play action, like, I love the fact that they were ready for Vic Fangio's strength, his fire zone pressures. They had a very clear plan to how to attack the fire zone and what Josh was going to throw into it versus a certain guy, or away from it versus certain guys. I thought when they got an empty, did you guys see when they got an empty, they would get into the 4 guys on one side, right, 1 guy on the other side, and they would motion away from the 4-person side. And it would be like, if they don't match that, we're going to throw the ball to, like, I think it was Dalton a lot, kind of on a quick out route. And if they flow that way, well, then we'll have someone come underneath and whatnot. So I like their empty package as well. I really did. So I think the diversity of their personnel and the formation willingness is something that gives me a little bit more confident there could be a consistent performance here.
In the last couple of weeks, Dan, we've also seen Dorsey have Deontay Hardy in the backfield, Diggs in the backfield last week, Sherfield in the backfield last week, and we've seen some late motion, like right before the snap. There's no motion. All of a sudden, there's late motion right before the snap. What is the iteration, and what are they trying to accomplish with that? Just if you can kind of explain the X's and O's in that realm, and where does it go from there? Is there a maturation from that into something else?
Yeah, so number one, with the different people in the backfield. So if you're not going to have that person, if we just called that person X, if he's not going to have any type of protection responsibilities, then you would prefer to have someone that is a pass catching threat in the backfield there, that maybe is a little bit more accustomed to knowing what hot means and having the ball get on them quickly versus a pressure. They're a guy to get the ball to in space in a little bit of a different capacity. So if you're not worried about the pressure in that game and having someone to have to be responsible to pick up a blitzer, then why not put one of those guys back there? The second element of it is you're trying to create matchups or hide, guys from matchups. That's why you would put a Steph back there. Because if you are, I don't even know who the Bills play next week because I'm still off of this weekend. But
they got
who
the
do
Jags.
they have?
Jags in London.
So if you're the Jags and you're sitting there, go, you know what? We're going to put Tyson Campbell. I should have known that in London. We're going to put Tyson Campbell on early downs with Steph as much as possible. Well, if you put Steph in the backfield, he doesn't know where he's going to go. Is he going to motion to the right? Is he going to motion to the left? And then more often than not, you're not going to have him at the line of scrimmage, because that's where Tyson Campbell is very good, at the line of scrimmage. Very good. So, that's part of the reason why you do that with a player like Steph. And then the motion thing is this. The late motion thing is so there's two forms of motion: information or impact. Years ago, the motion that would kind of go across the line of scrimmage slowly, does a guy follow him or not? If a defender runs with him, more than likely, man, okay, I have the information there. So we've seen in the past couple of years when guys are going in motion and the ball gets snapped, and that's for impacting the eyes of the defenders. If I have a set where there's two people on the right of the ball and two people on the left of the ball, well, the defense lines up basically in symmetry as well. Well, if the motion comes late and I snap it when that guy's going in motion, well, now this 2-person side became 3, and defense always has rules. And the main reason you're trying to do that is change the rules of the defense on the fly.
Yeah.
Change the rules of not only the defense structure, but the defense individually, what their rules are and what their responsibilities are now. And because I don't need all 11 cats on defense to be wrong. I need one. And that's really the premise on that stuff, is forcing the responsibilities of those guys to constantly change last second and making sure all of 11 of them are challenging them to do it right.
Dan, it's great seeing you. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you next week, and appreciate your time as always.
Thanks, guys. You're the best.